I go by the name Trav Fossils on Instagram and TikTok.
And Trav Fossils, that gives away what you do. Really, you're a fossil influencer, one of the biggest in the country, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I think the biggest in the country now, which is pretty crazy. That's only happened in like the last year or so. But yeah, digging up fossils and putting it online, that's my jam.
Where are you based, Trav?
I'm in Katherine in the Northern Territory, so pretty far from anywhere. It's a little town. It's got about like 7 or 8,000 people. If you know of where Darwin is, it's kind of south of Darwin, a couple of hours. So I was born there and I grew up there my whole life. So that's my home, that area.
How'd you get interested in the fossils then? Where did that come in?
I don't know where it came from. I reckon just as a kid, like any kid, you just love them, you know? And then
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of, a lot of people grow out of that as they grow up, and I certainly did as well. But then it was more of like as an adult getting back into it again, reigniting that passion that was just kind of laying dormant, which I think is dormant in most people as well. It's like a curiosity that's still there. Definitely was just obsessed with them as a kid. That's where it all came from, just a general curiosity that never quite left.
We wanted to chat to you about Queensland Dino Week. You're hosting a bit of a workshop up there in Richmond. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I've been up there digging for fossils for 4 or 5 years now. And so Kronosaurus Corner have asked me to run a couple of digging workshops just because I've had enough experience there at the dig sites now. So I'll be taking out guests in the morning for a digging at dawn tour. So it's essentially where tourists join me to dig for fossils, where I found all the fossils in all my videos. You'll be digging at the same place. So we'll be scratching around and seeing what we can find, which is, it's a pretty amazing thing to do. Like you're kind of in this old quarry and the sediments around you are basically all bivalve shells, and you've got belemnites and turtle fossils and fish fossils everywhere. And so people just come out with me and we'll be flipping over rocks and seeing what we can find. And that's, it sounds a bit gimmicky, but it's not. There's actually heaps of marine reptiles out there. And every year there's a couple more found just through these tours and doing them. So I'll be running a couple of those tours during Dinosaur Week.
Yeah, so you are based in the Northern Territory, but you keep coming across to Queensland. Why is that? What draws you there?
Definitely the fossils. So like the Northern Territory does have pretty good fossils as well, but it's definitely far more accessible in central Queensland. They're a bit more established there. And so, yeah, it's not like for me coming from a small town to another small town in Northern Australia, it's not a big change. The scenery is a bit different, but still you're in a small place, it's isolated. So for me, it's like, doesn't feel like a big change. It's like a 2-day drive. The only thing different is heaps of fossils. You have a whole museum to play with, a whole laboratory. Like it's really fun. So yeah, that's one aspect of it. And also that the people in the town are really, really nice and welcoming. So it's like a second home over there.
What are the kind of things you've been digging up there? I noticed recently you've been putting some stories of an elasmosaur up on your Instagram account. Tell me about that.
Last year, me and a mate were out digging and we found a few strange bones, and he ended up leaving the site and handed it over to me. And so I kept like digging around, and for about a month, didn't really find much else of this animal. We were only finding little fragments of bones, but it was a bit of a hint that there was something big nearby. And eventually, after I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks of digging, I kind of hit the main skeleton of this animal, and it turned out to be an elasmosaur. So at the moment, we've got like the jaw, the neck. I think the neck's complete. We've got like one flipper, maybe 1.5 flippers, and like the front of the torso, those sort of girdle bones. And it was going back under a hill. So now we've got a bulldozer and we've taken away the hill. And we're going to be starting up digging like mid-May, and we'll try and get the rest of the skeleton out. We're kind of assuming the second half of the skeleton is back in there, but we're not entirely sure because it's been crunched up by a Kronosaurus. There's bite marks all through these bones. So for all we know, the other half of the skeleton has been eaten. But we're hoping that it's still somewhat intact behind that hill.
Yeah, and if it's not there, hopefully something else will be in there. Maybe the Kronosaurus itself is in there. You never know.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, we're actually started to pull out a lot of ichthyosaur bones from there as well. So we're thinking there could be an ichthyosaur nearby, which is just like crazy to think about, that there's a elasmosaur washed up beside an ichthyosaur. But of that animal, we've only found like 6 or 7 bones of it. So I'm not going to get too ahead of myself and But you
Yeah.
know, you never know. It's a bit of a graveyard out there. There's so many marine reptiles washed up against each other. It wouldn't be impossible out of the picture. Yeah. This is at the public dig site in Richmond.
When we go out there for Queensland Dino Week, for anyone who's not been on a dig before, what will they actually experience? What will they get to see?
You'll definitely find a fossil. That's a guarantee. So you'll kind of hop into like a pit, like a hole in the ground, and you'll be able to see all the layers like in a cross section beside you, and you'll be taught how to pick which layers are like the most fossil bearing, and then kind of aim for them. So you'll be given, you know, a pick, chisel, all that stuff, and yeah, I'll just be there with you to guide you. If you find anything, you yell out, and, you know, what's this, what's that, and we kind of we peel back the layers and get down to the good fossil rich layers, and then just like, yeah, have a dig around, see what we find. It's pretty chill. It only goes for like a couple of hours in the coolest part of the day. But yeah, like, I don't know, like that it's kind of the most exciting thing about these tours is that you don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to find any day out there. It could be like the most boring start to a day ever. Like no one will be finding anything. And then it's just like someone flips over one rock and it's like, oh my God, like that is insane. That is a pterosaur bone. Like never know when it's going to, you know, just your day will just like turn into something else. So I don't know. It's like, it's exciting that you never know what you're going to expect, but you're always going to be finding fossils. They are everywhere out there.
It seems to me that you get really excited about that thrill of discovery. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, I live off it. It's really
Yeah.
exciting. Yeah, yeah.
What are some of the highlights you've had over your digging career?
There was a big Kudu australis found a few years back, which is like a large predatory fish. If you think of like a torpedo with the head of a bulldog on it, that's what it looks like. And so this thing was about 1.6 meters long and it had about 4 or 5 fish inside of its stomach. And it was fully complete. It's 100% complete. Bloody beautiful specimen. It's on display in the museum. That was a really exciting find because I just remember we'd been digging for about 2 weeks and found basically nothing, which happens sometimes. When I say nothing, I mean nothing in the sense of like no major discoveries. We found a
Yeah.
million squid fossils and fish fossils in that time. Um, and then just being like the last evening of the last day there and being like, I remember saying, I was like, I'm going to flip over one more rock and then we're going home because it's basically dark. And I flipped over that rock and this beautifully preserved tail came out. And I was like, whoa, that is good. That is really good. And then just like flagging it with the museum where it was and then had to leave town. And when I came back to Richmond, yeah, they'd cut it out, prepped it out, and it was on display. This massive fish. That was a really exciting moment. And there's definitely been other big highlights where, you know, we find a pterosaur bone or like an ichthyosaur. That's really exciting. But a lot of the time it's quite a slow burn. So you're never gonna like you rarely flip one rock open and then find the fossil of a lifetime. It's usually over the course of weeks you find it. So around every big animal, there's usually a debris field of bones. So you start to find the occasional bone, which is like normal. There's like a normal baseline of bones spread around the dig site that are just scattered everywhere. Only a few of them can be associated to a skeleton nearby. And so you never quite know if you're near something or it's just like a natural scattering on the seafloor of bones. So it's a slow burn, most of these discoveries that happen over many weeks and you find more and more and you go, oh, they're picking up in density. We're getting closer.
You have 165,000 followers on Instagram alone. What does your audience respond to?
I think authenticity, that's the main thing. You want to be authentic. It's a bit of a tough balance because you kind of need those hooks and you need it to be fast paced to kind of like, you know, go out to a lot of people, but you also want to be yourself. You don't want to kind of become some, you know, crazy character out there digging fossils, you know, for attention. I think people respond to authenticity the most. And it does surprise me sometimes what videos do well and what videos don't. Like I remember like maybe a year ago posting a really slow video, no music, and just like talking about the science of like a tooth or something. And it went really well. It was a really boring video. People loved it. Like it went crazy. I was like, I did not expect that. And then posting videos, I think, are going to be really good. They're kind of fast paced, they're interesting, and then they just kind of flop, and you go like, oh, like I wonder. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to it, but I think it's definitely authenticity is like the overarching kind of theme that people respond best to in this field.
Yeah. There is a bit of a tension there between that content creation, giving accessibility to people, and that authenticity that people crave, but then making sure the scientific rigor is also happening in the background. How do you walk that line?
Yeah, it's a really tough line to walk. I'm not gonna lie, because like a lot of specimens, like a lot of the time, so I'm doing it in reverse pretty much. A lot of the time, something will be found, it'll be kept secret, the papers will be made, and then they'll release the animal with the paper. But this is quite the opposite. Like the paper's in its infancy at the moment. It is being worked on, but I'm kind of releasing it all to the public already. Every bone we find and the
Yeah.
story before it's even done. So that's a bit unusual. It's not unheard of, but yeah. And it's also yeah, it's tricky as well because it's at a public dig site as well. So you're also kind of putting the site in the public eye, a very significant site. You're kind of leaving it open to people coming to visit. People can figure out where the location is. It's no secret as well. So that can potentially open it to fossil poachers and stuff. So you need to be really careful about that. So that putting it online, you also need to counteract that with making the site extremely safe. So like cornering it off, reburying it after every bone you find, or making sure every night every bone's out of the ground, that sort of stuff. So yeah, it can be a tough line to walk, but I think ultimately it's for the betterment, I reckon, to have the full story coming out, kind of like somewhat up to date, live. People can follow along with the whole journey of the process. Usually that story is done retrospectively, but it's very unique that it's being done with the fossil being taken out of the ground. So I think that sort of education to this level is invaluable. And yeah, I think it's okay.
Awesome. So what does that, that approach to preserving Australia's past mean for you as a content creator, rather than, I guess, coming at this as, a traditional, what we might see as a traditional academic paleontologist?
Yeah, so if you're coming at it from like an institutional point of view, it's very much like understanding, like preserving it through academia, which is like invaluable, and then preserving it through laboratories and putting it on displays. Also, the kind of how it's given out to the public and that sort of education. And I guess just as like a influencer alone, how this impacts preservation. For me, that's through education. So if I have a much larger platform than, say, museums and stuff, it's then kind of like my duty to to make sure this education side of things is done carefully and done well. So education is a very powerful tool in preservation. So if you have a public that understands the scientific value of fossils more than the monetary value, that's significant because people aren't just going to pocket fossils, and people know what to look for and they understand the scientific value. Fossils are always being found. People are going to find fossils. It's just what they do with them and how if they can identify them. So empowering people to identify fossils by seeing millions being found on my page, or me responding to them in the comments or whatever, that enables them to find them. And then it's also like, I'll never talk about the monetary value of fossils. It's always scientific value. Like, what can it tell us? Where's it going? How's it going to be studied? And that's exciting. Like, that people should be filled with wonder about that. And then I really hope that over decades and decades to come, with thousands of people finding fossils, that rubs off on them and they're going to be inclined to donate Australia's fossil heritage to museums and stuff, rather than putting it in private collections or selling it on black markets. So I guess as an influencer, that's how the mission to preserve fossils is being done.
Yeah. And you're then obviously taking that into person with the kinds of workshops and tours that you're leading for, specifically for Dino Week and those sorts of things as well. So what's the difference between educating, online versus in person?
I definitely reach. So online is a pretty well unlimited reach, but in person, it's just like, a couple of people. But in saying that, in person, it's a far more impactful and powerful way to do it. So there's differences for sure. But it's just the accessibility of social media to be able to spread that message is huge. But there's also nothing more authentic than being on the ground, digging with a person to teach them the importance of Australia's fossils.
When you set up your Instagram account and your other social media, did you think you'd get an audience like this? What was the
Yeah, so the aim was so there was probably two aims. So one was I like fossils and I wanted to kind of share, people those fossils I found. And then it was also like the museum was struggling a bit in town. So just kind of highlighting the dig site and what we found there and stuff, to potentially draw more people out to the town to help with them. And I kind of in my head, like I think a goal was when I started was that like somewhere near the end of my life, I would have like 10,000 followers and that would be like super cool. And, that would be like a really tight knit group of dinosaur enthusiasts that, look at little videos I make or, and that was like my goal. I was like, that would be amazing if I had that sort of audience. And then it just kind of became a beast of its own. Yeah, I definitely wasn't expecting it to grow to the size it grew to so quickly.
Yeah. It's, I think it definitely comes back to that authenticity that you're talking about, that willingness to be open and share what you're finding, but also to, tell people things in a way that makes sense to them and not make it abstract as well.
Yeah, that's it. You want to bring it back down to earth. I think it's like to see someone there in the field digging it up and just being like, "Oh, what's this? I don't know what it is." And then, you might accidentally break a bone and you catch it on footage. Oh, I'll put that in the video as well. That's pretty genuine. It happens sometimes. And then in the lab prepping it out and you go, I think it's this. And then, you go, oh, actually, I was completely wrong. It was this. And then it goes on display. People see that full process and it's just very human in that there's mistakes made along the way. You're incorrect. There's all your flaws are kind of put on the camera. And I think people recognize that and probably, that gels with a lot of people a bit more because I think it can be a bit glamorized paleontology. They find a skull and it's just like, oh, and there's a beautiful prep job done and it's this,
Yep.
but it's much more messy than that in real life. And I try not to shy away from that messiness of the process.
Yeah, as you said, it is kind of backwards because you see these people online sometimes who are completely confused about how we know anything about the fossils that we find. But actually, if you show the whole process like you are, then people can come to understand in a much more visceral way than just seeing a full mounted fossil on display, for example.
I think that's like half the magic of how a lot of that this audience has been built. It started with a series where I was like on a mission to find every fossil, and it was just me out digging. And so you literally got an entire documentation of the full discovery from before I'd found it when I was just out looking to now when there's papers being done on it. It's in a museum. And so that full process day by day being documented is very grounding for people to see how these specimens that are mounted in museums, where they came from and how they got there.
Is there something that you would, in your dreams, would be the dream fossil to find in, and dig up?
Yeah, it'd be a fully complete Kronosaurus. Actually, any completeness is okay. Just a Kronosaurus, a big chrono, would be amazing. Yeah, you go to bed sometimes at night, and you're just like, oh my god, like that would be amazing. Like just dreaming of it.
Fossils.
Fossils.
Fossils and fiction.